I sort of felt like I was never good enough at anything. You can't have performance without empathy. When you're an athlete, you're always striving to be better every single day. I remember going up to my room to write in my little dinky diary, I wanted to be a Silver Fern. I suddenly thought, gosh, someone outside of netball thinks that I can do this. I watched people like Waimarama Taumanu and Lee Gibbs and Sandra Edge, physically strong, mentally strong women performing on the netball court, and I thought, my God, I want to be like them. I came across a guy, Gilbert Inoka, and he said to me, Anna, you might not make it this time, but you will make it. We have a silver medal. I'm very proud of that silver medal, but it's not a gold medal. I realised that, well, we weren't good enough. If we were good enough, we would have won.
My name is Kyla Colvin. You're listening to my interview with Anna Galvan, and this is the Hunger and Heart Podcast. Enjoy the show. Hello, my name is Kyla Colvin, and welcome to episode 18 of Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. Just before we jump into today's episode, some very exciting news. I have just released my book, Courageous Communication. It is about getting great at having hard conversations, and I have not held anything back. In this book, we cover the 5 types of hard conversations and how to navigate them. We cover how to stay calm and present when things get tricky. I share specific sample phrases to tackle tough talks. We look at the 6 advanced techniques that can help you bridge any divide. I also give you cheat sheets so you can be prepared and confident for those hard conversations, and you can get your copy of the book free at nz.boma.global. My guest today is Anna Galvan. Anna's netball career spanned 17 years. She played for the Southern Sting and for the Canterbury Flames, later the Canterbury Tactix. As a Silver Fern representing New Zealand, she competed at the Commonwealth Games in 2002, where New Zealand lost the final in heartbreaking double overtime to Australia. In this conversation, we talk about that silver medal. We talk about the challenge of balancing motherhood with being a professional netballer and the work that Anna does now to support the next generation of athletes. So here you are, my conversation with Anna Galvan. What is your experience with wild ambition and fierce compassion?
Well, I love that question, mainly because I've spent most of my life kind of working in that field of, in spaces that reward ambition. So, for example, firstly as a high performance athlete, and then once I retired from playing netball, then I went into working in leadership roles and in governance roles following that, and then more recently probably in project delivery. And in every single one of those facets of my life so far, ambition has been one of the major drivers. It's actually something that I crave. It's something that if you said to me, Anna, what do you look for in a job? Well, it's 2 things really. It's competition, or it's that kind of that competitiveness, and it's that challenge. So yeah.
I love that. It's something that's come through over and over on this podcast is this unashamed, yes, I am super ambitious. I've heard it come through as ambition. I've heard it come through as obsession. I love that so much. How has care for others? I did a bit of research on you prior to this conversation. And one of the things that has come through a couple of times is comments you've made about the kind of relationships that you had with your team, with your coaches. You've described as camaraderie, relationships, family, friendships, those bonds. How did those relationships, what's the relationship between those kinds of relationships, that kind of camaraderie, and performance?
You can't have one without the other. That's the simple fact for me. You don't have performance without empathy or empathy without performance. They go hand in hand. They are intertwined with one another. I'll give you some examples. When you're an athlete, you're competing at the highest level. And when you play a team sport, often you're competing for a starting position on the court. So you have ambition to be on the court, but you also have empathy, I guess, for the player that you might be taking their spot on the court. I tell you what, though, it doesn't. I feel for that person, and and you know that you making them better, and them making you better is part of the team environment and what makes a team great. But at the same time, you still have your goal of being a starting player, and you drive towards that. As I say, not at the expense of other people, but almost as well as other people. If you work together in that competitive environment and have empathy for one another, it makes a better team.
So I'm imagining you in the netball environment, and I am going to ask you some questions about how you got into it and your career there. And that specific dynamic you just touched on, which is about selection. And I'm gunning for my spot on the team. And that means that my teammate, who I care about quite deeply, might not get, if I'm successful in my individual ambition, my teammate might not get the spot on the team. How do you navigate or balance the tension between your individual ambition and your commitment to what's best for the team?
That is such a great question, because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what a coach is there trying to do. In a netball team, for example, you've got 10 or 12 really great players, and your job is to make the sum of the parts greater than the parts themselves. And so in order to do that, you have to kind of foster this safe environment. And if I think about coaches who did that really well, one of them that comes to mind quite easily is the late Robin Broughton. Now, Robin coached us at Southern Steel down in Invercargill, and she managed to create this amazing team that won for 10 years or so in the national competition. And one of the things that she did really well is she got to know us each as human beings first and foremost. She really valued each of us for who we are, and she got to know us, our idiosyncrasies, our differences, our individuality. And because we felt safe and we felt cared for and we felt seen, it kind of, the whole team became not just about what I was doing as an individual, striving to be my best, but actually what was best for the team. So coaches and managers and people who lead teams actually have a really powerful position, and that they can help shape these sort of selfish individual employees or athletes or whatever they are, into understanding that they are there for the greater good of the team. And that to me is the magic of team sport, and that combining of that compassion and that ambition at the same time.
I love that story. I love the specificity of that example. And I'm going to ask a question that might seem obvious or rhetorical. It is a genuine question, which is what I heard you say was Robin understood each of us as players. We felt safe, we felt seen, and that's what led to us being able to perform. My question is, why is it important to feel seen? Is it not enough to just have the technical skills of how to get the ball through the net?
Oh, yeah. This is really getting into the essence of coaching and leading people, isn't it? Because for me personally, when you build that relationship and you have that two-way thing going, it makes you want to be good for that person. So by Robin seeing me and understanding me for who I was as an individual and some of the differences that maybe I brought to the team, it really made me want to play for her and to be the best I could be. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've answered that well, Carla, to
You
be honest, but
you absolutely have it. It's clearly a question there's no correct answer at the back of the book for. It's such an individual one, and I imagine kind of a tricky one to articulate, because I believe you. I'm completely with you, 100%. I believe so strongly that when we feel seen, we become free to achieve and to accomplish. And I'm always curious about how we articulate that to ourselves. The what is it in that unlocks us in that way? And so, yeah, you answered it beautifully.
let me think about it this way. Often when you're seen to be, we'll start in the athletic mode here. You're an athlete and you're seen to be quite driven and often quite hard-nosed, quite selfish. And then you kind of rub in this compassion side, and it seemed to be a bit softer. But I'm telling you that from my experience, the greatest strength is in when you combine them both. You've got that ambition and you've got that compassion, and you bring them together. That's where the magic happens.
Amazing. Well, that's good to hear because it's the whole premise of this podcast. Excellent. All right. I'm curious. Can you tell us a little bit about your netball career? I am very interested in the athletic side. And part of that is because that is so often where I've seen the impact of this commitment to performance, ambition, obsession, coupled with caring for human beings as whole human beings. So, can we start at the beginning? Tell us a little bit about your netball career and how you got to where you are now.
Mm. It's funny, zooming back because it seems like a long time ago now. I was 8 years old, which is a long time ago, and I watched the TV. The Commonwealth Games were on, and they were booming at us through the TV from Glasgow in Scotland. And I remember thinking to myself and going up to my room that night to write in my little dinky diary that I wanted to be a Silver Fern or represent New Zealand at the Commonwealth Games. And that came from two experiences. Firstly, that experience of watching the Commonwealth Games on TV. And secondly, from an experience that I had where I was down at Hagley Park in Christchurch, where I lived, and I played a warm-up game to the Silver Ferns. I was 8 years old, and then the Silver Ferns came on the court after me. And, I watched people like Waimarama Taumanu and Lee Gibbs and Sandra Edge, and these most amazing, strong, physically strong, mentally strong women performing on the netball court. And I thought, my God, I want to be like them. And I think those two instances, seeing role models or people who I wanted to be like, sparked me to write in my dinky diary at age 8 that that's what I wanted to do. Now, I had no one in my family that was an athlete or of any status. My father's family immigrated to New Zealand from Italy after the war, and we were new immigrants in New Zealand. They were very, very hard workers. They had to learn a new language and forge a new way of life and a new business. And I think that's basically all I had. I had an ability to set a goal and to work hard. So I set forth on that path. Now, it just so happened I went to school with the very great Bernice Meni, another fellow netball player, and her mum, Sally Meni, was our coach. And Sally and Bernie both inspired me. Bernie was ahead of me on her trajectory to be in the Silver Ferns. She was named in the Silver Ferns when she was 18 years old at Villa Maria College. I was a student at the school then and watched her go on stage, and the TV cameras came. And again, it showed me that being a Silver Fern was possible from where I was. And so some of those instances just sparked that belief in me. And I kept forging a path. And very lucky, early in my career, I came across a guy by the name of Gilbert Inoka, who will be familiar to you and your viewers. And Gilbert had come along to the trials for the New Zealand under-21 netball team. And I was 16 or 17 years at the time. And we were standing at the baggage carousel in Christchurch Airport. And he sidled up to me and he said to me, "Anna, you might not make it this time, but you will make it." Now that is still one of those most pivotal moments in my career where someone came up to me and I guess showed compassion, but he had belief in me. And from that moment, I suddenly thought, gosh, someone outside of netball thinks that I can do this. Okay. And again, that was just another, I guess, some more fuel on the fire. So from that point onwards, I did carry on my trajectory to netball. With netball, I ended up playing for about 17 years locally for the Canterbury Flames, as they were, the Tactix, the Southern Steel, for the Silver Ferns, for the New Zealand A team, and the New Zealand under-21 team. Not in that order, but of course, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for telling me that story. I can just picture Gilbert Inoka sidling up to you. What a beautiful moment. And one of the things I hear in there, so we had Christy Jenkins on the podcast recently, who was #1 in Australia and top 10 in the world across 3 different sports, trampolining, beach volleyball, and CrossFit. And she talked about this idea of the relationship between coach and athlete, and what the coach gives the athlete is belief, and what the athlete gives the coach is trust. And so a couple of things I just heard in your story. One is the belief that Bernice Meni, that Gilbert Anoka had in you, in the
Mm.
investment that they made in you, and in feeding your soul with that belief that you could then adopt for yourself, and that ability to see that it was possible
Mm.
for you or people like you. This is a thing that people like me do. I am 1 degree of separation from someone who has been on this trajectory and gone on to be part of the Silver Ferns, and of course this is possible for me. So I just wanted to highlight those things in your story because it really, I think, drives home that these messages that we give ourselves and that others give us has such a huge impact on what we believe is possible.
Agreed. And that's why I'm also so hot on the topic of having powerful women sports role models as well as, leadership role models. But, we need to, young people need to see these women and have them profiled and see how amazing they are.
Yeah, incredible. It's one of the things that makes me so happy. I've been following the American rugby player Alona Mayer on social media, and her entire social media is just like, look how strong I am, and this is what, my body is like. And, she's just so like owns her presence. And I think having people see that it's possible to feel that proud of who you are is a really powerful thing.
Mm,
I
agreed.
want to ask you some hard questions. So you started this journey age 8, watching the Commonwealth Games on TV, and going, I could do that. Maybe that would be me someday. You wrote it in, you said, your dinky diary. 2002, you go to the Commonwealth Games, Manchester, uh, lose
Mm.
in the final double overtime final by just 2 goals. It's been described as heartbreaking, as brutal. My question for you is, how did you process that loss? What did you go through afterwards, and how did you work through it in order to be able to kind of reconcile with what you had experienced?
Ah, it's so funny that you asked that question because even listening to you ask me then, it gives me tingles, to be honest with you. That's 20 years, 22 years later, 23 years later, it's still actually quite painful. Australia,
Sorry, I didn't mean to re-traumatize you.
Australia, full credit to them. They had an amazing performance, but honestly, that's hard to get over. It's hard to get over. It's hard to process. It was difficult for me to talk about that. I wasn't even on the court, so I mean, that just shows how much impact it probably has on your life when you're an athlete. You gear up for these pinnacle events and you do everything you possibly can to put yourself in the driver's seat to win a tournament, to win a gold medal, to win the world champs. And to fall short in double extra time, the first time in history that a netball game had ever gone to double extra time, was heartbreaking, to be honest. And I felt for my teammates, I felt for the coaches, I felt for everyone. And it did take a long, long time to process. To be honest with you, I kind of don't know if you ever get over it. Um, we have a silver medal. I'm very proud of that silver medal, but it's not a gold medal. And I would have loved nothing more, as would have my teammates and everyone involved in that team, loved that to have been gold, but it wasn't to be. And it wasn't. So, yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's sport, though.
Yeah, sport is heartbreaking. Sport is
Mm.
so heartbreaking. I feel every time I watch a game, even if I'm watching a team that I'm cheering for, I always feel bad for the team that loses. Even if it's the other team and my team wins, sport is truly heartbreaking. And I find it fascinating, this thing where for 99.9% of people in the world, a silver medal would be the pinnacle of possible. They couldn't even fathom getting to that level of achievement. And of course, in this instance, a silver medal doesn't represent a win, it represents a loss, which I imagine is so challenging. I appreciate what you're saying, that it's likely you never get over it. And I feel you that you're going, I feel this in my body 23 years later, it still brings that up. And you came back and continued to play after. How do you, and we're going to get to what happened in between. Uh,
Mm.
Obviously, you had a significant life change in between that experience and coming back to play. So we will come back to that. But when you went back to play netball for the Tactics, how did you mentally take care of yourself so that you could show up and focus on this game and what's in front of me, and not bring in that tug of the pain you'd experienced previously?
Again, that's a great question. And I think for me, how it manifested was that I realized that, well, we weren't good enough. I mean, if we were good enough, we would have won. And so it put me on a trajectory to make myself better. I had to be a better athlete. Physically and mentally, I needed to be better. Now, there's some life changes that did happen, which made me better as well. But then you take that experience and the life lessons, and then the being a little bit older, I came back. I was fitter, I was faster, I was stronger than I had ever been because of that experience.
I love this. And what I hear in there is total accountability. What I
Yeah,
hear in there is, yes, we had that pain. Yes, we had that horrific experience. And as painful as it is, we weren't good enough. What's in our power? What are we going to do now? What are we going to do differently? How am I going to turn this around or make myself better so that I'm less likely to experience something like that in the future?
that's right. And I know I've already referenced Gilbert and Oka, but there's, coming from Canterbury, we have all these amazing people around us. We have the likes of Wayne Smith and Gilbert, and that's in the rugby sense, but then all these amazing, strong women role models in netball too, who were teaching us these valuable life lessons along the way. And yeah, one of those things was, we had to learn how to control the controllables. And I guess if you peel that right back, it is actually about being accountable, because it's about controlling things which are within your control. And ultimately, the scoreline wasn't in our control, but how we react, what we do after that, how we build from that loss, how we get over it, that is all in our control.
I love that. And of course, we've had Wayne Smith on the podcast as well. He is always such a font of wisdom. Now, you and I both have alluded to the major life changes that happened after the 2002 Commonwealth Games. You became a mom, now a mom of three. Talk to me about that shift in identity from unencumbered professional netball player to mom. What was that like, and how did you navigate that?
That was really difficult, to be honest with you, a difficult period. I had this, Hugh and I had Isabella, our oldest child, and she was just the most amazing child. We were very, very lucky. She became my world. I was besotted. I was completely besotted by her. I wasn't expecting to have a baby when I was 24 years old. I was actually due to get on the plane to go to the World Cup in 2003, which the team went on in Jamaica to win that World Cup. So again, was sitting at home, nursing a new baby, watching them win the World Cup, which was amazing. But it was difficult in my mind to kind of reconcile what was going on in my life. I had this child, this beautiful daughter, Isabella, who I was, as I say, completely besotted by, and who was amazing. We were so lucky. But my world had flipped upside down. And my friends were still over in the UK doing their OEs. And in fact, one of them sent me a message about 2 or 3 days ago saying, "Hey, Anna, can you remember when you had a baby? We just had no idea. And we sent you a case of wine from the UK to celebrate." And they're like, "Now, if we knew what we knew, we wouldn't have sent you a case of wine." But that just shows, where me and my friends were in our thinking. So, yeah, I had this big life change. Motherhood it made me probably softer initially. I loved being at home with my daughter. I loved making a home. I loved being at home to cook and, do all those domestic things. But probably within about 3 months of that, I started to get itchy feet. Yeah. And I pause there because I think what happened next is the Southern Steel called me actually and said, "Hey, you were due to play for us this year. You couldn't. You had a baby, but you're coming back next year." And so by the time Bells was 6 months old, I was back on the court playing netball, and that was difficult, but also I was back in my place of passion, doing what I loved and I knew.
Thank you for telling me that story. I want to acknowledge a few things in it. The first thing I want to acknowledge is it's so clear how much you love your first child, and I assume your other children as well. And F. Scott Fitzgerald said that the mark of a first-rate mind is the ability to hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously
Mm,
and still retain the ability to function. And it makes total sense to me that you might be delighted to be a mom, that you might absolutely adore your children, that you might have zero regrets about your choices, and you might also have internal friction about, but I want to be playing and my
mm,
teammates are off at the World Cup. And, that like they're all of those things can be true at the same time, I think, without diminishing any of them. And
mm,
so my question for you is when you went back to play, how did you navigate that? What need of yours did that feed? And what challenges did it create for you?
mm. So netball was my passion, and for me to be back playing, it gave me perspective, and it gave me a purpose, and it really filled my passion cup. So it made me a better mum ultimately, and a better wife. Hugh and I were married by then, and so I was definitely a better person. Some people think that when you become a mum, it softens you and somehow diminishes your edge, but I didn't find that. Um, I found it difficult to be away from her overnight or for periods of time. But ultimately, I found that it really sharpened me as an athlete because I really wanted to be at training. It was a break from the routine of being a mum, and so yeah, I guess I'm going to sort of take us through on that journey because I went on to have two more kids, Harry and Charlotte, and then came back to playing netball again. And again, just once I had three little kids and was playing for the Tactics, we were playing in what was called the ANZ Championship at the time. We were traveling between New Zealand and Australia every week, like something like the Warriors do now, playing games. And you could be in Perth or whatever, and your three kids are at home with the au pair. So it was difficult, but again, it I think it made me a better athlete, and I think that modeling to my kids that you can be ambitious, and you can have empathy for what's going on at home, and as you said, hold two things at once, and it made me a better person. So yeah, that's what I did.
I love that. Last week we had Sam Whitelock on the podcast, and he said that someone had told him when he becomes a father, it will make him a better rugby player because he will be so much more intentional about his
Yeah.
time. Like, I'm not here to mess around and, waste time walking from one drill to the next. I'm here to show up, do my job, go home. And that was one of the things that he learned, which I just heard replicated in what you've just said. What else did you learn from your kids that informed the way that you show up as an athlete?
Yeah, well, anyone who's got family and children know that, man, it just gives you the balance that you didn't have beforehand. Sometimes when you're an athlete, you read the paper and, you read an article and they slam the way you play it in your performance or the team or whatever. Well, you go home and your kids couldn't care less. They want their spaghetti and meatballs on the table. So it just gives you that perspective and that life balance. And I completely concur with what Sam Whitelock's, what he said and what he experienced. I was so much better as an athlete. I became even better. My time was incredibly precious. My sleep was precious. My food was precious. Everything I did became quite specific. So much so that I can recall setting a timer to have a 10-minute nap between trainings before I had to pick a child up from kindergarten. And I could use mindfulness to drop asleep straight away, wake up 10 minutes later and be good to go again. And I had to be able to do that because to train as an athlete 2 or 3 times a day and manage three small kids, you never got a full night's sleep. It was hard. It's time here to acknowledge too, Hugh, at home, and the help that we had. It takes a community to raise. Gee, did it what? I mean, we had neighbours, we had all sorts of people helping us. And in fact, if I can just highlight one story, well, it's not actually a good story, but one day Hugh was late home from work to look after the kids so I could get to training. And my coach at the time actually dropped me from the starting lineup. And my wonder in preparing for this podcast with you was, what sort of empathy was that coach exhibiting at that time? It wasn't a pattern. It was just a one-off thing that happened. And I remember getting dropped from the lineup. I was so angry at Hugh because of that. And it created all this angst in our house. And I was like, and it was hard, to be honest. It was difficult. And I think times have moved on for athletes now. I know that in netball, a lot of the kids are at the trainings and they can come along. For me, and this is probably a mental model that I held, I'm not necessarily saying that my netball club pushed this on me, but I felt like I was to show up as an athlete and sort of almost pretend I didn't have kids. So that it was hard, to be honest with you, and that was the reality of it.
I so appreciate you sharing that story, and the specific things that I appreciate about it. First of all, just the honesty of it and the acknowledgement of, yes, this thing happened. And then my reaction was to be so angry at my husband, which I'm sure people listening will have had maybe not similar experiences in the sense of being a professional netball player and getting dropped from the starting lineup, but similar experiences of, I'm just struggling with this. How do I make all the things work? And I can't maybe get them getting dinged over here for this thing over here that's not. And how do I react to this? And who do I blame for that? Like all of that, it's just so human, the story that you've just shared. And while everyone's circumstances will be different, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to, how do I navigate that? And then the second thing that I love about that story is that insight into, what does it look like to support someone who has skill, who has ambition, who has commitment, and who has an environment and circumstances that might mean that some days they're going to be 5 minutes late to training? Is that an indication of a lack of commitment to what we're here for? Or what is the appropriate response to that situation? And your comment that you think times have moved on, I think for those listening as leaders, as coaches, to go, actually, is this a situation that calls for a very serious consequence, like you're going to be dropped from the starting lineup? Or is this a situation that calls for, let me understand what's going on and how can I better support this athlete so they can perform?
Exactly. And I think of a really small little anecdote. Connect before you correct. Even if the coach had said, hey, how are you doing? I would have said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. It probably all would have tumbled up, but I didn't get that opportunity because I was late. Look, I do hope that leaders who are listening to this understand that there are people who are trying their best and you muck up. It's not always smooth sailing. We all know that. And just showing empathy, having compassion, understanding their circumstances is really important.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you not tough or hard. There's still accountability in there, and there has to be.
Yeah. Talk to me about that. This is one of the questions I get all the time in my work is, sure, you can have empathy, but at some point you have to get the job done. Where is for you, how do coaches navigate that tension between, I want to see you as a whole person, understand what you're going through, understand your constraints, and we need to deliver? How do we navigate that?
Yeah, well, if you and I know that, then we've got the secret sauce, haven't we? For me, that is the secret sauce. And, for me, using compassion or empathy as a coach or as a leader, it's not a soft skill. It's a leadership edge. It's something in your toolkit that will set you apart from other leaders, other coaches, other people. And so use it, lead with it, be empathetic, understand people on a human level. it goes back to that saying. I mean, I know you will have heard it so many times. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing? It is the people. It is the people. It is the people.
Yeah. And I guess that skill, that edge lies in, okay, so right now, Anna has showed up late because her husband was late coming home and she couldn't leave the kids. And she's really sorry for that. And I appreciate that. And I see the whole person and the whole athlete that Anna is. And I understand that this is this particular circumstance versus someone who's late every single day going, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, but nothing changes and there's no plan put in place. And I think that's from a leadership perspective, that is the art of going, when is this a time to go, actually, this has no bearing on what I think this athlete is capable of and, should be tasked with, versus this actually impacts the way that I assess the capabilities and availability and readiness of this athlete in this moment.
Well said.
Mm.
You should be a sports coach.
I would if I knew anything about any sport. I'm curious, you obviously have spent a lot of time thinking about these kinds of things generally. And I know I've done a lot of kind of leadership training. Again, stalked you a fair bit before this conversation. I saw that you had done the Wahine Toa program at the New Zealand Olympic Committee. What was that program like and what did you learn on it?
Oh, I loved that program. I mean, I felt it unpacked some stuff for me and unpacked some things for a lot of women in that room being on that course. We have this kind of, I carried around with me some baggage from being an athlete that I wasn't aware of. And when you're an athlete, you're always striving to be better. Every single day, you want to be better. There's always someone who's better than you that you're aiming for. So it unpacked the fact that I sort of felt like I was never good enough at anything because you're used to striving. And being in a room, in a really safe space with some amazing Olympian, Paralympian, and Commonwealth Games athletes who had a similar shared thought pattern in their heads was revealing. And there was tears and there was, there was closure, actually. Just that, yeah, it doesn't matter if you only got a silver medal. It doesn't matter that you didn't make the top four. It didn't matter that any of those numerous things that had happened in the careers of these women. We are enough. We are good enough. And then from that flowed, and actually I'm going to reference another course that Sport New Zealand took a group of us on, which was a leadership course, which unpacked the premise behind armoured leadership. And at the time in the 90s and the early 2000s, when I was initially playing elite sport, athletes weren't really allowed. You didn't show your vulnerabilities. You were tough, you were hard-edged, you were driven, you were selfish, you were all those things elite athletes were seen to be. And I realized that actually you can take your armor off and be vulnerable and be yourself, and it actually makes you an even better leader. And on those two courses, the Wahine Toa and the Sport New Zealand course, to learn those two things was really eye-opening, to be honest with you.
Now we're getting into the territory that I play on every day, specifically this concept of vulnerability and armor, et cetera. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions that might seem like ignorant questions. They're, again, genuine questions and questions that I know the folks listening will have. When we talk about taking armor off, when we talk about showing vulnerability, what does that mean in the context of being an elite athlete? Does that mean crying on the court?
Wow, great question. For me, what it meant was it's almost like you need counselling once you close your athletic journey behind you, because there's things that have happened to you that you've experienced that, that I guess normal people or people working in a normal environment wouldn't have had to have gone through. And so, I mean, I didn't have counselling per se, but just it's really cathartic being surrounded by other people and talking about shared experiences and similarities. And once things became normalized, I guess you can kind of get over them. Once you verbalize and then normalize. And look, I don't have any of the background and the understanding of the research and the philosophy behind these things, but I'm just, I guess, talking to you about what I experienced. And then you're sort of able to pack everything up in a wee box and put it aside and close that chapter, understanding all the things that were good about it and maybe some of the things that were detrimental to you in your ongoing life. And as I say, pack that away. It was what it was, and it's enabled me to be who I am now.
Thank you for that. There are a few things that come to mind for me on that. One of them is that folks listening who have never been involved in elite sport, it would not be surprising to me if everyone listening has had an experience of going, how do I navigate this environment? When do I show myself? When do I maintain my hard edge and my serious outer shell? When do I allow myself to be seen? And so the specific experience of being an elite athlete and then retiring from that and migrating through a transition to the next stage of your life would be unique to that environment. But that human experience of when and how do I allow myself to be seen? When is it safe to be seen? And who else has had a similar experience to me so that I can realize that I'm not alone in this world? That is just such a human experience that I think is so important for people to have. And whether that comes through counseling or through programs like you did or through connection, just talking to others, it's just such an important thing to help us feel like we can be seen in this world, which is kind of where we started the conversation.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I agree. And look, when you look back now, you remember all the amazing moments of your sporting journey. And people often say, what is the thing you remember most? Well, for me, and maybe this is a reflection of my personality too, it's not about the wins and the losses per se, but it's about the people and the relationships and the friendships that you made and the shared experiences. And it's so powerful, and it stays with you forever. Yeah, we're pretty lucky to have that lifestyle and be afforded those opportunities.
Yeah. Amazing. The other thing I would note is you mentioned about it doesn't matter that we got silver, that we didn't make the top four, you are enough. My understanding is that there's some reasonably decent research done into gold medal depression or post-Olympic depression generally, specifically, but then also when people who win whatever they achieve, whatever it is they're looking for, and they realize that actually there's a guy who just went super viral, a golf player who just won a big tournament, and he went super viral going, yeah, we celebrate for 15 minutes or 3 days or whatever it is. And then it's like, now we're right back into training for the next thing and nothing changes. And the thing there about being enough is enough as a totally independent thing to the outcome. It's enough whether it was silver or whether it was gold. It doesn't actually, my wholeness as a human is independent of any medal or no medal. Is that consistent with the kind of conversations you had in your programs?
It is. And it is exactly right. And, just to go on that, just let's strip the medals away or the winning and the losing away. I'm not sure if any other athletes on this have talked about the black hole that you go into once you've been on a tour or at a pinnacle event. You've been with people 24/7 for 3 weeks on a Caribbean tour or whatever you were doing. And then you come home and you've got to drive your car and make your bed and cook your food. And sure, I always remember being so happy to be home and in my own bed and with my friends and family, but also really, really down, missing my teammates, missing the camaraderie, missing the shared passion, missing the common goal that we're working towards. And that's been difficult, but it's also been really helpful, because now I guess if we zoom up and you look at changes that happen in your life, if you're sort of used to on a micro scale pulling yourself up and down out of those dips, when you have bigger things that happen, you're actually better at pulling yourself up. I'm going to reference a couple of examples here. So firstly, when you retire from being an athlete, of course, you go through, your self-worth is generally wrapped up in who you are and what you did on the sports field. And then you're nothing. So that's the first instance. And secondly, recently, 6 months ago, I was made redundant. And, I had a similar feeling, but I knew that I had all the tools and resources within me to deal with that, because firstly, I'd had a baby and come back to playing netball. Secondly, I'd retired and I'd reinvented myself. And thirdly, I'm made redundant. I can spring back up from this, no problem. I can forge away again. And I think often people get to the end of their working life, they might be 65 or whatever, and they stop working, and then they have that flat fall. Well, I see what athletes go through is similar to that. I haven't obviously experienced that, but I hope that some of these tools and resources in me are going to help me in those phases of my life, but also other people can learn from them.
I love that. I just picture you coming back from a tour and taking out the rubbish going, don't they know who I am?
Well, that's the reality, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned Christy Jenkins earlier. One of the other things she said in our conversation was she talked about different types of confidence. And one of the types of confidence was the confidence of, I have been here before, where I have done tried hard things, failed at them, tried again, learned from them, and been able to kind of come out the other side. And that's what I'm hearing and what you're saying is this thing of like, well, I've just been made redundant, but guess what? I've been here before where I've done hard things. I've been in holes. I've worked through them, come out the other side, and kind of figured out how to navigate. And so it doesn't mean the experience isn't hard. It means that you have the lived experience of going through hard things. Like the
Exactly.
coach, Kara Lawson, talks about, you don't look for easy. You look to be able to handle hard better. And that's what I'm hearing and
Exactly.
what you're doing.
I couldn't agree more. And then, if I listen to you, and I'm loving this because I'm learning from you as I speak. In work, we do a plan, do, review cycle and projects that we work on. It's exactly the same as athletes. You plan your campaign, you do your campaign, you review it, and then you go again. It's cyclic. Yeah.
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 Amazing. Okay, I've got a few more questions for you. So you mentioned obviously you retired from sports and gone into the working world. Talk to me a little bit about Napuna Wai. Tell me how that came into existence and why that was important to you. And actually, if you could
Great.
tell us about what it is first, and then the whole thing.
Perfect. Christchurch Netball Centre, which is the centre that governs all of sort of netball in Christchurch from a club perspective, was very, very generously given a $10 million donation from a Auckland benefactor. And the idea was that this donation was given to Christchurch Netball after the Christchurch earthquakes to help young women in our city have a place to play, to call home. So for many years, the Christchurch Netball Board worked with various people to find a site to build this new facility, and it took a heck of a long time. It took about 8 to 10 years in the end. I came along very late in the project. I was a member of the board at Christchurch Netball. The chair at the time had finished her term, and she wasn't able to stand again because she'd reached the tenure. I was thrust forward as the chair. I didn't know how to do it, but I said, okay, I'll do it, and took on the project of leading Christchurch Netball, but also this project, turning this $10 million donation into a netball facility for young women and young people in our city. The project was fraught with hurdles, let's just say. it had been a long time in on the ground, actually, and in fact so long that the benefactor said, hey, look, if you don't use this money in the next 2 to 3 months, we're actually going to take it from you and give it to someone else. So the project got to a crunchy point. We were able to right-side it. The Christchurch City Council worked with us, various other stakeholders, and we found a piece of land out at Ngāpuna, which has now become the new sporting hub in Christchurch, after the Christchurch QE2 site was ruined in the 2022 earthquake. And to cut a long story short, we turned the $10 million donation into an $11 million donation. The benefactor upped it by $1 million. We were able to gather funding from other sources, Lion Foundation, the Lotteries Commission, etc., etc. Had some very staunch supporters in the Canterbury region who helped us with that. And we were able to build this $16.5 million facility at Ngāpuna, 10 indoor netball courts, futsal courts, volleyball courts, pickleball courts, and rhythmic gymnastics, the home of Canterbury Rhythmic Gymnastics, into a reality. And for me, that project was something I threw my heart and soul into. It was voluntary, of course, and myself and the other directors spent hours and hours and hours and hours of our volunteer time working on that project. And it was pretty special to see it open, to be honest. But it wasn't just about the stadium opening. For me, when I walk in there now and I'm watching my daughter play netball and I'm seeing the community in there and the kids doing gymnastics or korfball or futsal or whatever it is, that's what makes this project special. It's not just the concrete and the steel, but it's the community that it's managed to form for our people of Canterbury, and in fact wider across New Zealand.
Amazing. I hear you tell that story of, I hear the why in that. I hear the why in, I walk in there and I see my daughter playing netball and I see the community and I see what it means for others. Of course, you were acknowledged with a Netball New Zealand Service Award. What was that like? How did that feel?
That was pretty special. I mean, it was very special, and I appreciate the acknowledgement. One thing that I don't like being singled out, because as a team, there's a team of us who made that project happen. And that's how these things happen here, is by getting the right people on the bus, going in the right direction, working together. And that's what we had here. We got a committed team on board, from the project managers to the people who constructed it, to the funders, to just the mentors who I had on the end of the phone, to the fellow directors, to Warren Poe, someone who I phone called, I referenced, he was my most called number. He was above my husband on my phone, because, we had to work on this project. It became quite nitty gritty. It came quite tight. And to see that come to fruition and to receive that award was very humbling. But I also, I feel it was a team of people who did that.
It's hard. It sounds like it's hard to sit with the acknowledgement of your role in that team.
It is, and that's a personality thing as much as anything. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I heard you talk about the village and all the people and the project people and Warren Poe and all that kind of stuff. And I also heard you say, and when you first started talking about the project, that you were thrust into the role of chair, and you had to lead this project and you didn't know how. When you found yourself in that situation of, I don't know how, what do you do?
I ruminated about this because I thought you might ask that question, and I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if I've got a process in my head per se, but there's a couple of things I know I do. I listen really carefully. I actively listen to people. I ask questions and I listen. And I also believe that in order to get a project or a team or a whatever humming, it's all about the people and the teamwork. So for me, anytime I'm faced with something I don't know how to do, firstly, I ask questions. Secondly, I listen. And thirdly, I get the right people on the project. And that's kind of a recipe that I've used the last 2 or 3 times I've had something tricky. I don't know what to do. And it's sort of, I guess, the key ingredients that I've started with.
Beautiful. And it makes total sense to me. If I don't know how, I don't know what to do, then I need to learn. And the way that I learn is by asking questions of the right people and listening to their answers. So it makes total sense to me. Anna, we're just about at the end of our time together. I do have one final question for you, which is, I understand, is it current that you're on a mission to read 52 books this year?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I am.
What have you been reading and what have you learned?
Okay, well, I love this question. I love reading. Reading is a massive passion of mine. My blooming eyesight's not as good now, so I need the blooming lights on. Like, anyway, that's frustrating. But I've just finished yesterday reading The Language of Flowers, and it's fiction, but I love, if I wasn't a netball player, I would have loved to have been a florist. I love flowers and nature, so that book was a real I love that book because it talked about the hidden meaning behind flowers. Anyway, I just love reading anything, to be honest with you. I read, books like Good to Great. I read anything and anything I can get my hands on.
Have you read The Signature of All Things?
No, I haven't. Shall I add that to my list?
Oh, if you like the flowers one, The Signature of All Things is a must read. It's Elizabeth Gilbert. I have not read Eat, Pray, Love because the vibe of it is a turnoff to me personally. I'm a judger. I judge books by their covers. I didn't read the book. I didn't see the movie, but The Signature of All Things, one of my absolute favorite books. Totally kick-ass female protagonist. Talks about nature and fungi and mosses, and yeah, it's a good one.
It sounds like my book. I've written it down. I'm going to add that to my list and probably start onto that tonight. Love it.
Amazing. Let me know once you read it. I'll be keen to get your feedback on it.
I'll let you know.
Anna, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I have loved our conversation. I've taken so much away from it, and I really appreciate you spending this time with me.
Well, hey, a big shout out to you. Thank you for what you do, because honestly, you're making a difference. You're bringing these stories to light. You're highlighting these learnings that people have had, and we really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. It's been great. Thank you so much for listening. What an absolutely lovely human being. She clearly got so much joy from doing something she loved with people she loved. I especially appreciated her framework on how to tackle situations where she doesn't know what to do. First, ask questions. Second, listen. Third, make sure you've got the right people around you. So simple, so straightforward, so transferable. Thank you again for listening. Please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me on hello@kylacolbin.com. And of course, thank you for liking the podcast, for subscribing to the podcast, for following, for getting those notifications going. They make such a difference to us and to our ability to bring you amazing episodes every week. Thanks again, and see you next time. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Programme. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Read. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week, high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Ray Jangle, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, Samuel Unke, and me, Kyla Colbin. Thanks for listening.